Welcome to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, where we sit down with the people who give shape, texture, and voice to life on the North Fork of Long Island. Some are rooted here by generations, others arrived by chance or choice, but all carry with them a piece of the story. We talk about what's changing, what's worth holding on to, and the currents of history, both quiet and loud, that run through this place. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 142, we sit down with Minerva Perez, Executive Director of OLA of Eastern Long Island, an organization dedicated to advocacy, education, cultural engagement for the region's Latino and immigrant communities. Before stepping into the world of advocacy, Minerva built a career in the arts, a path that gave her unique tools for storytelling, bridge building, and community connection. Since taking the helm of OLA, she has expanded its mission to address pressing issues such as language access, youth empowerment, cultural representation, and building trust between immigrant communities and local institutions. Along the way, she's fought hard battles, celebrated meaningful wins, and championed programs that give young people a voice in shaping their own futures. Today we'll talk about her personal journey, the evolution of OLA, and her vision for the East End's future. So I hope you enjoy episode 142 with Minerva Perez. This episode was recorded August 6, 2025. Thank you so much for coming on the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. It's really a pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you. And so in the beginning, I'd like to just start off if you can tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what early experiences shaped your path through community advocacy.
So I was born in Manhattan, and I was raised in Miami, and I was born to a Puerto Rican father and a mother who was half Italian and half Polish. And she was not able to raise me, which is a big part of my formative experience because she was mentally ill severely. And so my grandparents raised me in Miami. And so I think from a very early age, I became a case manager. And because that's just what happens, you kind of get parentified. But it was a glorious time for me in lots of ways. It just meant that, I just had more responsibilities. But I think it did kind of shape me and kind of allowed me to have a deeper level of empathy in terms of certain needs, emotional and mental health needs. It took me a while to grow the empathy. As a young person, I think I was still not happy about it, probably a lot of anger. But I think a lot of those things certainly formed who I am. And then I ended up going to college in the city, in New York City, and loved it, stayed there, and just found that there were a lot of social causes that interested me enough to try to bring my best to them, and in a few different ways, creatively and also in other ways.
Mm-hmm. And did you go through all of high school through Miami?
Mm-hmm.
But then you decided to come up to New York for the arts. Was that something you knew coming out of high school that you wanted to do?
I did. It was sort of a toss between be a lawyer or be an actor or somehow figure out how to do both.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I would go to NYU because I was lucky to get accepted, and somehow I was going to graduate, and I did. It wasn't an easy school to pull the funds together for, but being in the city was really important for me, and also learning ways that the arts and conversations around very difficult topics could happen through the arts was very important for me as well.
Mm-hmm. And around what time frame was that you were in New York City?
That was 85 to 89 that I was in college, but then I stayed on probably for another 15 years or so in the city before I moved out here. I moved out to the East End of Long Island about 22 years ago.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could even describe a little bit what you thought of New York City at that time in the mid to late 80s, there was probably a lot of different things going on at that time.
It was mind-blowing in the best possible way. There, I didn't want to sleep. I just wanted to be learning about what new group I could be connected to, what theater was happening, what new film was happening. When I was in NYU, they were still using analog and celluloid that they were cutting. So it was an interesting, different time. And just was so excited by the energy, just never wanted to sleep again. It was just a great place to be. And I was lucky to be there then.
And would you visit the East End of Long Island? Or when was the first time you came out to the East End of Long Island?
Not until later. So
Okay.
the person that I ended up marrying at the time, his family is from mid Long Island. So they would occasionally want to take a day trip to the East End. Sag Harbor was kind of a destination, or Montauk. And so a few times I went out with them. Never was really on my mind to move out there because it felt really isolated, and I loved the city. But I had spent a good 15, at that point, 20 years in the city. We had a theater company together, actually, my then husband. And we were doing all kind of socially relevant work, but really good theater, like not soapbox, obnoxious, boring, preachy theater, but really, really good theater. And for about 8 years, and then our marriage was breaking up, which was a very sad time. And we had a 5-year-old. And so at that point, it was like, all right, where are we going? And our support system would have been his parents in mid Long Island. And I knew that I did not want to live in mid Long Island, that I had some good experiences out in Sag Harbor or the East End. And I thought, I've got to figure it out, got to make it happen. And again, luckily I did. I was able to find a location that truly felt like community for me, which is weird because, yes, it's the East End of Long Island on the South Fork, but I truly felt this kinship with so many different groups, whether they be artists, theater artists, musicians, local folks, people that work in the fishing industry, Latino community members. It was just so interesting. What a broad range of sort of pockets of the community that really spoke to me, and I was able to move my grandmother and my mother in from Florida to take care of them. Found a house that would work for all of us and my daughter, and it really was, a saving grace to be in the community.
And were you doing any advocacy or community work at that time before working at OLA?
Yeah, definitely before OLA. Before I moved
Okay.
out to the East End of Long Island, I had been doing some things in the
Okay.
area of domestic violence and other work that I was getting behind. But when I moved out to the East End, I had to kind of, start from scratch in a few different ways. And but very quickly, I started seeing this really anti-immigrant sentiment coming from the Suffolk County Executive's office. And it was all frightening and jarring to me because I grew up in Miami and I went to university in New York City, and I was not used to hearing that. I mean, these were like just places that had a lot of diversity and a lot of vibrancy, and how people were discussing different topics. People didn't necessarily agree, but it didn't feel like there was always one person that was the scapegoat and always one group of people that was always the one that had no power and lived in fear. And then I came out to the East End of Long Island. I was like, wait a minute, how am I hearing this over and over again? How are people actually considering voting on these bills that are so completely anti-immigrant? And that was about 2005 or 6 or so. And so I started asking around, who's working with members of the Latino community? I had not done that in the city, because that'd be the last thing that I would be called in to do, really, because I didn't grow up speaking Spanish in my household. I heard probably more Yiddish than I heard Spanish. And but yet I grew up with my Latino friends who were from Cuba, from Chile, from Colombia, from a few different places. So Spanish was spoken everywhere around me, and the mentors in my life were all Latino, strong women. So I had different connections for different reasons. But coming out here, I just thought, I want to help. Well, whoever's doing the work, I just want to support. I'll make coffee. I'll make photocopies, whatever they need. And so I learned about OLA at that time, and learned about Isabel Sepulveda de Scanlon, who's one of the founders of OLA. She's a Chilean super powerhouse woman, and met with her. And she was so gracious and generous with her time that she did not put up a doorway or a test. You have to do this first. She welcomed my interest and shared with me everything she could about sort of the history of what she had experienced so far as being a Chilean person trying to raise her kids out here, coming from Chile and coming from different experiences. And I really learned a lot from her and joined the organization. And it was all volunteer board. At that point, there was one person, Sandra Dunn, who was hired on to be a part-time executive director. She's amazing. But then she went on to run for council, I think in Southampton. So she left that position. And I found myself signing on to be the volunteer executive director. And I was doing that with a full-time job, with a child who I was trying to figure out how to live on the East End of Long Island. Lots of things going on. But I loved it until it was kind of a little bit too much. Stepped away, had to have a job that I could sort of pay the rent, and then ended up joining the retreat, where I found myself, I had been volunteering here and there at the retreat, and found myself becoming the director of the shelter, and absolutely loving it and feeling fully sort of, I don't know, just identifying myself with the kind of work that I could do there and how I could support the team, how I could support, it was mainly women and children, although the shelter is open for, all genders, but, and it was 24 hours. So 24-hour staff, family members coming from all over, not just local, certainly not super local because that's not safe, but coming from all over, even as far as Seattle, if that was the safest place for them to be, and really, really terrible circumstances. And what it meant to be part of that breaking of the cycle, so that there could be another way that this family could live or see themselves living in another way that wasn't just completely drenched in violence and degradation. And it was really amazing work. So I did that for 6 years.
Wow. And
then at a certain point, it became clear that the vision that I had, which I tend to have a lot of vision, wasn't really the place for that organization at that time. Respect that, stepped away, and it was the right time for me to consider being back at OLA. And that was February 2016. So not November, it was February. And I was the first time only full-time paid executive director. There were no other paid people in the organization. And then things happened and just lots more work needed to be done. But it was a thrill to have the trust of the board to let me learn the landscape from my perspective as who I am, not pretending to be anything else. I am who I am, did not grow up bilingually, biculturally. Definitely an advocate. I found that for sure, especially doing the work with the retreat. And they let me kind of learn what is the landscape at that moment. Where are the spaces where an organization like OLA could really kind of step in, and how could we collaborate with all the existing organizations? There are not a lot of Latino-focused organizations that are founded and based in the East End of Long Island, but there are certainly now more nonprofits that are kind of dedicating a lot of their energies to serving Latino members of the community as well. And that's really been wonderful to see. But a lot of work that we do and work that interests me is definitely advocacy work. So it's not just putting out fires. It is, what is the lasting systems change work that we can do? What are the dialogues that we're having and creating? Where's the accountability that we're creating? So that whether or not you're a Latino leader of a town or a village, you have as much accountability for those who live and visit and work in your community as anybody else might. And of course, we should grow leadership that is also organically Latino, to represent, we have 50% Latino student body across 23 school districts on the East End of Long Island. Certainly we don't have enough representation. And I don't look at that as like a finger wagging thing. Like, shame on you, Latinos, for not, being on the board of this or volunteering your time with that. We have different dynamics, but oftentimes the power structures don't fully acknowledge what those structures look like from another perspective. And if we don't change that or don't at least acknowledge that, we're going to have what we have, which is not a healthy power dynamic at all.
Yes. And even just to go back a bit, even when you were out here in the 2000s, I think there was a growing Latino community base, probably even the 90s or late 80s too, but that has continued to grow. But even if you could go in a little bit more detail for listeners that may not be familiar with OLA of Eastern Long Island, How has it grown even or changed since you became executive director?
Well, again, with the support from the board and the wonderful relationships that I could build with organizations and individuals that really also saw the need for OLA to be an important organization with strength and sustainability. We now have 22 people working for OLA. We offer healthcare. We have people that have been with us for almost about 9 years. We've got our fourth baby being born into OLA, um, and we've got a few different departments. The core of OLA has remained the same, but what we can fit in these, you know, buckets is a lot more. But it's advocacy, education, and the arts, and I like to stick to those three and say that they are equally important. One does not hold more weight than the other. And so we have a team of, for our immigration team, we have 3 full-time immigration lawyers, something that we had been trying to do for a while. So that's been up and going now for a little over 2 years. We have an advocacy team as well. And that team used to be called a crisis team. And we, after a few years, we're like, wow, just call yourself a crisis team. And guess what? You're going to get crisis. So we're advocacy. And that team, all the teams are amazing, but that team is focused in on sort of the day-to-day needs of our community that reach out to us. But again, not just to put out every fire. We try to do that if we can, but what we're really looking for are the trends. If we're seeing the same fire in East Hampton, we're seeing the same fire in Greenport, and we're seeing the same fire in Riverhead, we're going to look at what is happening right there, and how do we address that as more of a systems thing. You know, how are we now reaching out to the beginning of that fire? Where was it smoldering? Where was it smoldering 50 years ago, 75 years ago? How do we reach back, and what are we doing right now to change that? Whether it's policy work, whether it's a different understanding of those who are in a position of power, or leadership, I'd say, and how do we address those things? So some of the systems out here are pretty massive, and it doesn't mean that they're unchangeable or unwilling to listen and hear and have dialogue, but they're pretty entrenched systems, and it's difficult to work with them, just as systems in general, not the people necessarily. But we've got 23 school districts. You know, we've got 10 police departments. We've got 10 court systems, and these are all independent. Our 10 justice court systems are not part of the New York State Unified Court System. Our police departments are not part of Suffolk County Police. They're not part of, they don't report to anyone but the towns and villages who employ them. And that could be a very beautiful thing, and often it is. And then there are times that challenge us, like the times that we're living in right now challenge us. Yeah. So the work we do with our advocacy team ranges from wage theft. We're seeing a lot of wage theft. So individual work with community members on how they might be able to recoup the money that is theirs, that they weren't being paid, and then being threatened that if they did ask for it again, or they did complain in any way, that either that former employer would call ICE or call the police or call any kind of threat. We're working with housing exploitation, the victims of housing exploitation, victims of deed theft. We have tremendous partnerships or agencies that we can reach out to that we feel really great about. I probably shouldn't say partnerships because it puts us like in the same level. We're not quite that at all. But the Attorney General's office is an office that we feel really confident about reaching out to when we see trends of injustice, and one of those trends is deed theft. And so we've been tracking that and working with a number of victims. Our advocacy team is also working with families families with children who have disabilities. And so what are their needs? How are their needs being met? What is it like to navigate those needs when you're a parent who doesn't know English that well and don't necessarily know the culture or the different types of support that you might have access to, the things that your child really is going to need, and you have access to them. But if things feel like a fight, or they feel like you're asking for too much, an immigrant parent might not do that. And it's not because they don't care. And that's the part that kind of kills me, is when someone might view an immigrant parent not coming to a PTA meeting or not advocating for every single thing that their child with Down syndrome should be having, is not because that parent doesn't care. That parent is living a very different experience. And there are community groups and houses of faith that support some of the needs of parents as well. We are always reaching out to our community partners in a variety of ways. But overall, a child with disabilities should be able to have access to these services. And it shouldn't be that you're moving a mountain or that you need a village to move the mountain every single time a child is presenting with those needs. We would like to see those systems shift and change in a way to fully embrace the needs of whatever child, whichever child, whomever, whatever the English is, that is coming into that district or living in that community. Mm-hmm. Similarly, elderly. Our elders are extremely important to us. And over the years, we've noted that senior services, wherever they do exist in our towns and villages, and some towns and villages can do the best they can. Some do really great work, that oftentimes the connecting point to Latino elders is not really there and can be developed. And we are always availing ourselves for free to towns and villages, and in any way that we can augment what is the communication point there? What are the barriers? What are the challenges, and how can we help address them so that even if you're bringing seniors together to play a couple of board games and have some sandwiches, having access to that and not being isolated, even if you're not running the program in Spanish, it still might be fine, you know. And if you get one or two Latino members of the community who are Spanish speakers, who are, you know, maybe they're over 60 to be even a part of these things, maybe they're just going to be happy to be there, and maybe they tell their friend, you know what, I had a lot of fun. Why don't you come with me next time? And the isolation point that we found during COVID, and we certainly know exists, is a make or break for life or death, especially with the elderly. And so we've been trying to address those things as we can. We got involved with Stony Brook, a wonderful program where we were running something called A Matter of Balance. And we were running it only in Spanish. So that was a 10-week program, meeting with elders, Spanish-speaking elders, to run through a whole series of modules on things they can do so that they don't fall down. You know, falls prevention is what it was all about. So we did that, I think, 2 or 3 different cohorts of that. And then we also were running Tai Chi in Spanish, and sometimes bilingually, depending upon the senior center. If they really wanted us to do it bilingually, we would. But it was a way of basically, it's a welcoming call to say that you might speak Spanish mainly or only, and you've been living here for a long, 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 long time. And your kids or your grandkids are probably working. You're probably not driving. How are you getting to and from, and where are your destination points? You might be in a loving family, in a multi-generational family, but what are you getting to do? You know, so we're interested in the full range of experience and access point for every single person on the east end of Long Island.
And I think you're filling in a lot of those gaps that, like you said, either the schools or the towns, whether they might not provide it or they're short funding, you're providing that extra service for the communities in those areas.
Yeah, and we're trying to do a little bit of that as best we can. We're a small organization. I'll tell you, I think we have 21 full-time people, 1 part-time person, so 22 in total. It's less than $2 million for our budget. So I want to say that out loud.
Yes.
Not a lot of money. And to do all that we do, we are not a government organization. We have a little bit of funding from Suffolk County. And I'll tell you some of the other departments that we have. But we have a little bit of that. We got a little bit of money from the state, and I'll tell you what that's for. But a lot of our money is coming from individual and private foundations and individuals. We are not set fiscally. Every single year we look for our budget from scratch. So the idea that I don't ever want OLA to be seen as filling in too many of the gaps. What I want to see OLA doing is showing the institutions that we currently have already that they can do it. They don't need necessarily extra funding to do it. And it is their mission to do just that. So if your mission is to work with the elderly, that means you're working with the elderly. That means, what are you doing for outreach for the elderly that might not be sitting right in front of you? What are other ways that you might be able to let them know about your services? What makes sense? You know, what is safe? Who can you work with? Maybe it's OLA, maybe it's CAST, maybe it's the church. Find your partners and work with them to make sure that you truly are meeting the needs, or trying to meet the needs of those who are in your town or your village. It's your mission. Yes. So I don't want to be a gap or filler. You know, yes. I want to know that the missions that we have to serve our community are fully engaged, or at the very least, working with community partners to find out how they can engage a bit more, because our communities are always changing. We're not looking at a community from 1940. And we need to really kind of dive into that, lean into that, and all the beauty that it means, that it represents.
Yes. And you mentioned some of the issues that you're working on today, but do you have some of the most pressing issues facing the Latino or immigrant communities on the East End, Long Island today?
Yeah, so I had mentioned we have the immigration team, we have the advocacy team. I'll tell you about one other team in a second, but I would say that mainly the immigration team and the advocacy team are the hardest thing that we're facing right now is fear. Fear of simply doing your laundry. In Greenport, you could do your laundry at 9 a.m. and be approached by someone from ICE or some federal agent, and when they're not even looking for you necessarily. They were looking potentially for someone else, but because you spoke to them, and our community members, our immigrant community members, are so compliant, so respectful, and not even just out of fear, but just out of an inherent respect for authority, that if you have a person that walks up on them who looks official and says, "Oh, have you seen this person? Oh, you haven't? What's your name? Do you have an identification on you?" That person is immediately presenting their identification, even if it is a visa from another country. And whether that person is in process to have their full status adjusted, because many people are, but it's a long process if you're lucky enough to even have a lawyer or access to that process. But they are not thinking in ways of, how do I evade this person? How do I lie to this person? There is a true respect and, for this authority. And it's unfortunately doing people in, I mean, there are rights that we have, they're in the Constitution. And we feel that it's such a sad thing that what we have to build up is this ability to kind of truly stand up for yourself. And of course, many people can and do, but it's this idea that you can be respectful and you're not going to be thought less of because you're thinking of yourself for a moment and your family. But what a terrible thing to try to, wean out of people, their care, their concern, their level of, maybe it's a good thing to wean out of people, stand up for yourselves and then really know what your rights are. But it's a tough situation because if you do too much of that, you get in trouble. If you do too little of that, you get in trouble, So I'd say the biggest thing that people are facing right now is this fear of like doing the wrong thing, because everyone that I work with, we're dealing with people that have no criminal background, and yet they're walking around in fear and wondering what they could have done that's so wrong. The lives that they've lived out here for 20 years, the children that they've raised that have been valedictorian, that are going to Harvard Law, that are going to, we've got folks that have started a Latino young leaders affinity group. And, the leaders of that are going to Johns Hopkins, Yale, and Georgetown. Their families raised them here because they cared so much about this area. They care so much about education, about what those children can bring back to their communities and bring back to this country. And yet you have people just walking around stunned to try to understand what they did that was so wrong. So it's not just fear. It's also this absolute crushing of the soul of a family. Like, I'm not even just a community. The word community gets used so much. I use it way too much. But it's the soul of a family, the soul of a child who now suddenly sees themselves in the mirror as the bad guy, And oftentimes, they're fully documented. They're born here. They're second generation, third generation, but they still look in the mirror. Why am I so bad? Why do they want to do these terrible things to my family? It's soul crushing. It's dumb. It's not the way forward for this country. None of it makes sense. And so it's a combination of sort of the fear that is running through our community for every little thing: doing your laundry, going to church, going to a meeting, supporting other people. And also this idea that you're just little by little stomping out the light that is within our families and our community.
And for OLA, moving forward in terms of the situation going on, are there any new things you're trying to do to make the community feel more comfortable in that way? I mean, obviously it's a hard thing to deal with because people don't want to even, they might not even want to come out in the community. So just reaching out to them can probably be hard too. But just moving forward, what other things are you working on?
Sure. So the other department that I want to mention now, since I'm just talking about kind of young people and their response to this soul crushing actions, is Youth Connect. So we did develop Youth Connect over 3 years ago as a response to the research that we were doing and tracking the mental health needs of youth. And specifically middle schoolers and high schoolers on the east end of Long Island. So we did a pretty big survey, got great responses. We had we paid Stony Brook to analyze it, and we were doing this kind of during COVID, but we weren't doing it about COVID. It wasn't about COVID. We just happened to be doing it at that time. And what we ended up doing we've been stepping into every crisis that existed so far, well, since 2016. And during COVID, we stepped into that entirely in terms of running testing pods, vaccine pods, working directly with the state when there were no other pods in our local area that were minority focused, when it was 65 and up. And we were seeing the most vulnerable people in our community not having access to vaccines. Our team was helping to create those pods, running those pods without any vaccines. Our team did not get vaccinated. We just ran the pods and helped other people get vaccinated. We've been stepping into crisis just all the time, helped to get a bunch of school districts. It was like $1.9 million worth of Chromebooks and hotspots when our school districts weren't having enough for remote learning. And that came through a person on our board who wanted to just focus on that. So it was almost like a pass-through, but we were able to help and lead that. And then when the mental health needs of our communities were showing themselves, even with the adults, we stepped into something called Project Hope, which was a mental and emotional health support initiative for areas that experienced high levels of morbidity. And Suffolk County was one of them. So we stepped into that, and within a month we hired 33 people to be able to reach out to the full east end of Long Island when we were still sometimes in lockdown.
Yes.
It wasn't safe to go to the grocery store, but we were doing that, and we hired people that spoke Portuguese, Spanish. There were African-American folks, Shinnecock folks, white folks, but we had a whole range of people to meet the needs of what our community is to the best of our ability in a very quick period of time. Those types of actions are meaningful to me because it's important to show that OLA's interest and OLA's leadership, it's not just me, it's the team that I'm with, most amazing humans, is that we don't do this work to only carve out Latinos, put our arms around them and say, oh, it's COVID time, let's watch out only for Latinos. No, we have been behind initiatives and actions that were massive amounts of work to make sure that we can do it in a way that is proper, inclusive, sensitive, language access based. And that's the kind of work that we believe in. And we want to model the work that we feel is doable. We're showing ourselves doing this work as this tiny organization. There is no reason in the world why our larger institutions can't take from some of that, can't partner in stronger ways, can't commit to different protocols and practices that allow for more people in the community to feel the kind of support of their missions. So that's kind of why we lean in. So our mental health work that we do, we initiated something called Youth Connect when we realized that we could do it. We did this Project Hope thing. It was only supposed to last 6 months. It lasted 2 years. And then after that, we said, we're going to launch something that is going to be meaningful for our youth. So we go into schools, middle schools and high schools. We present one classroom at a time, usually health class. And we do that in Spanish and in English. And we talk about mental health. We talk about how youth can create or strengthen the networks that they have of support, because sometimes they don't even realize the support that they might have around them, or sometimes they don't trust it. They don't want it. We operate a helpline 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 11 p.m. in Spanish and English. Mostly it's texting. So youth are texting us 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. They can text us and say, I'm having a bad day. I hate my mother, whatever it might be. And we're going to be with them right there in that moment, not to fix it, not to, bring them into an OLA agenda. This is for all youth, so this is, and youth are texting us in English, youth that have money. They are not Latino. We know by what they're texting about or what they're saying about themselves. And they just need someone to listen, to be there for them in that moment. And we are there for them. And so this is something we believe very much in. It's been over 3 years now that we're running it. It probably costs about $700,000 right now for us to do this. We get about $50,000 from the state, but we're on the budget for New York State. And that means everything in the world to me because they have looked over what we're doing. It is something that is clearly needed and they trust us with that. We want to build that money, of course. But in the meanwhile, we are thrilled that we have that support and that we can keep doing this work. I have a dedicated team of, I think, five people right now dedicated to just Youth Connect. They're not doing anything else in OLA. So just working with adolescent mental health. And so we're going into houses of faith sometimes and giving presentations. We're giving mostly directly in schools, but then also sports activities that might be going on. We're in libraries, doing a lot of great work in libraries. So excited to be here. We just launched a book that we published with East Hampton Library that is an East Hampton middle school survival guide, where we met with middle school students over the course of 3 different workshops and a lot of pizza to kind of talk about what are the things they're dealing with in middle school and how do we illustrate that? How do we write that out? And they just wrote it in their handwriting, made their drawings, and we pulled it together. We have a great team member, Adriana, who helped with the graphics, but all the stuff that they did, we kept. And it's super exciting. So we're looking to do that across many different libraries across the east end of Long Island, and it's bilingual. So any of the students that wrote in English, we made sure to add the Spanish in kind of fun and exciting ways. So the book is fully bilingual, and it is from their words, their drawings, and it's really cool stuff. And we're excited to see if the differences, the similarities between East Hampton or Greenport or Riverhead middle school survival guides. And it's kind of it's super exciting. But so that's some of what Youth Connect is doing and what we lean into fully. And there's some other programs that we're doing within that as well. Spanish language programs that are evidence-based Spanish language programs that we've been able to add with partnerships with another organization called Hugs. So that's been nice. But so we partner everywhere all the time, anytime we can. But our mission is really a strong one that is a Latino focus mission with this level of inclusivity that lets us lead with the experience and the knowledge that we have of what actually works for a community. You don't take a school community and separate Latinos. You say, this is a school community. All these youth together make up the community. How do we serve all of them? How are we here for all of them? How do we show up? How do we build trust within the administrations of the schools? Because we allow students to text us anonymously. And that scares the heck out of everybody. Because what we've learned is that, and we understand where it's coming from. It's not coming from a bad place, but it's scary because you're in charge of the lives and the health and the safety of all these kids. God forbid you can't control the outcome when a problem is presented to you. At least if the kid is right in front of you saying, this is my problem and it's a big problem, you now have you're going to do your best to control the outcome, be a mandated reporter, make sure that you're doing everything that you are supposed to do. But we know there are all these gaps and gray areas within that. We know that students don't present what their needs are because they're so afraid of what their parents might get in trouble for, or they don't know what the process is going to be. Well, if I present to you that I'm really depressed and I'm maybe using self-harm, does that mean that you're going to think that I don't want to live anymore? Or will you know that maybe for me right now, I just need a little more help. I need someone to listen. I need my mother to not freak out. I need to not, I need to know a little bit more about what this process is going to be. Youth don't have control of a lot of what's around them in their lives.
Yes.
And when it comes to their mental health needs, it's not good to feel that you don't have any control, you don't have any knowledge, you're fully isolated, you have nowhere to go. And this is even in families where there seems like there's everywhere to go. You've got a mother, maybe she's a therapist. You've got you've got all of these resources around you. But if you don't feel safe enough or good about reaching out to that, what does it matter? So what we're offering with Youth Connect is we don't expect it to be, it's not a clinical offering. We're not diagnosing people. on a text line, but it is this in-between step where youth can reach out, and maybe by doing so, they might ask some questions. We might share, well, hey, here's some resources that might be around you. Maybe this is a way to approach this conversation with your mother, or what do you think is a good way to approach? Have you mentioned this to your mom or your dad? Or there are ways that we're trying to bring students back into some support systems that they don't know even exist. And sometimes we are the support system for that moment in their lives. And we hold that responsibility, even if they're blocking their line. And we hold the responsibility and the fear if we hold all of that. Yeah. We cannot be afraid. We cannot be the adults in the room that are too afraid to hear the problem that the child has, because we can't control the outcome.
Yes. And also, can you talk about how OLA has worked to improve relations between immigrant communities and local law enforcement and government institutions?
Sure. So again, as we see the opportunities for kind of growing engagement, let's say within a community, we first off bring that to whatever leadership is there, whether it's law enforcement or whether it's a town or a town senior services department or a town youth department. And we reach out first to share maybe some opportunities there. Or oftentimes we're sharing what we're wanting to do to support. So what we don't want to do is go to these institutions and say, you're not doing enough here or here or here. We should just do better. That's never our MO. Our MO is like, we've seen this thing. There might be some opportunity to do some better engagement. And if we're going to say that, what can we bring to the table? And so what we try to do is do it in that way, so that if we're saying that, wow, it would be really wonderful to have maybe a couple of these programs translated on the website, or is there a language access element to this one or two programs? We know that right now with towns, we can't necessarily say everything is translated all the time or everything is simultaneously interpreted. We would like to see a lot more language access, but we also want to bring whatever we can bring. It doesn't mean that we are the translators of the East End. It doesn't mean that we're able to offer a simultaneous interpretation for every board meeting or every meeting, but we can help people learn how they have access themselves, how it's not that hard to bring in a simultaneous interpreter. Yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a budget for that, but there might be a little bit of budget for the coffee everyone's drinking. Where are your priorities? We really want to look at the words that people might share about, we really want to see more engagement in this with this group of people. Well, let me look at what you're doing. Let me look at your budget. Let me look at where you prioritize this. Where does your board prioritize this? So we really kind of dig down into that, but in conversations, and we try to do that. Let's say with law enforcement, something that I have enjoyed doing, I haven't done a lot recently, although I really want to, especially now, during Trump 1 and before Trump and after Trump, is having dialogues with law enforcement, and not just leadership, because I do find that sometimes that can be a little bit easier if I'm reaching out to the lieutenant or I'm reaching out to the chief and just asking for some thoughts on this, or, hey, how are you handling that? Or can you share this policy, or things like that. And those are usually pretty smooth conversations. I've got some great relationships, some that are still being developed. I'll say it like that. But what I've really enjoyed is when OLA's been able to have conversations. We call them Latino diversity training, but I feel like training, using that word, seems a little reductive with law enforcement, because I think they've been doing a lot. They've been, so they've been doing a lot of their own things that they want to do to kind of engage the community. But it's more of a sort of very active, vibrant conversation where I can come in and meet with an entire department, 25 people at a time. And that could be Marine Patrol officers, lieutenants, detectives, dispatch, everyone. And group by group, share what, in the moment, what is OLA working on? What do we feel is kind of a critical space to make sure that we can bridge some gaps of understanding, communication, acknowledgements, whatever. And then asking law enforcement in the room directly, where are some areas that you feel that you would want to see OLA take on, or where are some areas that are troubling for you that you feel like there could be better work that maybe we get to do together, or that we could just be aware of. And oftentimes I don't do that one person at a time speaking out loud. I might have people write things down on blank pieces of paper so that they're not putting their names on it. I found that that is more successful. But having the dialogue in the room is also very important. So I found that if there's a conversation we're going to have, I will go up to an individual and just be able to engage them in that moment. There's no gotcha moments. I'm not trying to make people look bad, but just like a real conversation. And once one person starts talking, it's a bit easier for everyone else to like throw in a little bit, We'll do role plays sometimes when it comes to certain things. Like I've done a lot of work in domestic violence. So doing a role play where we have a staff member, a team member from OLA, acting as a person who's in the middle of a maybe domestic violence situation, responding to law enforcement showing up at the door and bringing up one of the officers to come in and do that. Now that's kind of a tricky thing, because now there's officers in front of everybody. There's a lot of male officers or some female officers, but might feel a bit nervous about doing something wrong. But in kind of running through that role play and then kind of talking about it afterward, important to see that the work that we're doing with OLA is not like, well, you should have done that better. That was terrible. That was terrible. It's like, no, my gosh. Let's learn from this together. What do we think? The person playing the victim in that case, what did she think? How did she feel about the eye contact or the lack of eye contact, the tone of voice? And again, it's a little performative because it's happening right there in front of their peers. But you could still kind of talk about some certain things that make sense to have a conversation about, even in terms of eye contact, or if you're using language line and you're not relying on the phone, you're looking at the phone, but how are you engaging with that person in that moment? And how can that engagement end up being sort of a life-saving situation, even for you as an officer? Because if you're engaging with that person eye to eye, you might be learning a lot because of all your training with law enforcement. It might lead you to believe that all those eye movements that she's making, she's trying to tell me that someone's in the house. She's trying to tell me that It's not safe, that she's fine, everything's fine, but her eyes are darting off to the right because there's someone over there. That level of engagement, even if you don't have, you can't speak the language yourself as the officer, or she can't speak the language of the English language, what can you gain from that experience? And how critically important is it to kind of do that and kind of role play that? And because work happens really fast, and domestic violence calls are sometimes the most deadly for everyone involved, including law enforcement. So things like that I'm really excited about the work when I get to be and have team members with me in front of law enforcement, and we're really engaging, and sometimes in difficult conversations. I'm looking forward to getting, not during the summer because it's just too busy for everyone, but probably in the fall, winter, to get back into some departments and be able to have some of those conversations. And allow for law enforcement to hear directly from us, because the worst thing is when all of the conversations kind of funnel through one, what do you call it, speaker, one direction, right? So if I'm talking only to a chief, and that I really want the full force to understand, the full, whatever police force to know that this is where OLA stands on this issue. It's not the police's job or the police chief's job to kind of echo every single thing I just said to him. But if we have a chance to speak directly to law enforcement, they know the other things that we're working on. They would understand the mental health work that we're doing with youth. They would understand what we're doing with victims of illegal lockouts and why it's important for the community's sake, that we are taking illegal lockouts and trying to enforce them as strongly and as efficiently and consistently as we can. But if we're able to speak that directly to law enforcement, they can ask us some questions. Well, what about this? Or I can ask them, hey, what is it really difficult to do this? Or what are the processes involved in that? If I learn that, we kind of understand why maybe it's not a good way to approach it the way that we're thinking of. We'll learn a lot from speaking directly to law enforcement and not having the kind of barrier that is there because of time, because of all the work that they're doing, the work that we're doing. So it's really, really wonderful when we can be in front of law enforcement. So I'm looking forward to putting together a bunch of sessions for that.
And also, just even over your time since 2016, what have been some of the biggest wins or hardest battles you've faced in your time at OLA?
I think working together with local groups and also even at the state level, we really needed to see Green Light New York pass. The fact that folks were not having a lawful way to be on the roads and have car insurance was not good for anyone. And it was a law originally that you could do that as an undocumented person, have a driver's license and the ability to get car insurance. But after 9/11, that changed. And then it became apparent over years of tracking data and whatnot that wasn't really making it safer for people. And it wasn't really a deterrent to any kind of major terrorist action. So across the country, states were going back on that and making it possible for undocumented folks to have driver's licenses. And New York State took a while to do that. And when that did happen, it was a tremendous win. And we did everything we could. We're not lobbyists, but just in terms of, talking to local law enforcement, talking to towns and villages about how important it would be to make sure that families could get to and from their employment, drop their kids off at school, go to the doctor's office. During that time frame when it wasn't lawful to have a car on the road and whatnot, and there were a lot more traffic stops that were happening in a particular time frame. There just were. Fact, we studied it. We have the FOIL data. We started a medical transportation offering that we still run to this day because we were seeing that families were not getting to the doctors, like critical doctor's appointments. So we still now help drive people to their cancer treatments, children with terminal illnesses, people who are slowly going blind, kids with cerebral palsy. There are some transportation services that do exist, but we found that especially for the weakest people that are really dealing with like severe illnesses or terminal illnesses, some of the Medicaid transport situations just don't cut it. And in addition to driving, we're also usually helping with interpretation and kind of a calming, supportive. We're not a taxi, we're sitting there with them in the doctor's office often, at least the waiting room, sometimes actually in the doctor's office if the client wants us to be there. And so navigating healthcare access is very interesting. Additional part of what we do is as advocates, but that came about as more and more tickets were happening or more fear was existing around driving a car. And so we're very, very grateful and happy that was a huge win. And it wasn't just a win for OLA, it was a win for the entire state.
Yes. And also, OLA isn't just about policies and advocacy, but also celebrates Latino culture through events like the Latino Film Festival. Why is cultural programming such an important part of the organization's mission?
Sure. So cultural programming for us is a way to really speak to the beauty of what our shared community is. And so when we're going now into our 22nd annual Latino Film Festival of the Hamptons, and which is always Spanish language films with English subtitles. Once or twice we brought in Portuguese language films. But so we do that every once in a while, but mainly it's Spanish language, English subtitled. And this year, for the second year, we're working with Norfolk Art Center, amazing cinema right here in Greenport, with some tremendous support systems there. Shannon is wonderful, the whole team. And we do this very much as a bridge event or a bridge offering where people that can come into that don't have to be Latino, don't have to speak Spanish, but they're going to be sitting in, a dark room watching this story unfold, let's say for the film festival. And it's going to be appealing to them because they're human beings. These are human stories, so this is a way of getting people together and in the most obvious way, trying to remind and remember that we are all humans together. And there are beautiful moments that happen in our cultural events. The film festival is one, and then the other one has been our Pachanga, which is a music and dance offering. And we did our most recent one in Riverhead at the Suffolk Theater, which was a tremendous success. And it's joy. It's also joy. How do we have joy together? We don't just put our nose to the grindstone and fight, and we're concerned about this and we're upset about that. Where's the joy? What's worth fighting for? What's worth caring about? And we're in those spaces when we're creating those spaces of joy. And there are Latinos and non-Latinos and young people and old people and all different backgrounds. And we're in that space. It changes your cells to know that in that moment you were looking across. Okay.
That's okay.
Sorry. It changes your cellular nature to know that in that space, you were able to experience that joy with someone that maybe if you walk down the street, you would either be afraid of them or feel like you had nothing in common. But in our cultural spaces, those are moments that can change everything for a person and for a community. So we continue to lean into those, even though they're extremely difficult. It was very hard to pull off the things that we pull off in the midst of lots of crisis and fear. We're not going to back away from the OLA Film Festival. You know, we know that there are going to be people that don't necessarily feel comfortable coming to a Spanish language film. And we honor that, we respect that, but we're not going to not do it. We're going to do it. We also produced and created, I was a co-director, and Margarita Espada was the other co-director. She's amazing. The first ever Spanish language production we did at Guildhall in East Hampton, and that was of a Lope de Vega classic, Fuente Ovejuna. Very powerful play, and we brought in all community actors, and most of them without any experience at all acting. And it was one of the most beautiful productions I've ever done. And I've done some theater, and this was just one of the most amazing experiences ever. And we did it only in Spanish. We had an English libretto. So in the same way that you might go to the opera, you could follow along the story. It's a classic story. And we had children in the play. We had all different people from different backgrounds, different countries. And they committed themselves to, it was over 6 months of rehearsal. And Guildhall was also a tremendous partner. It was the perfect time. Thank heavens we opened that play in mid-May, because if we were opening that play right now, I don't know what, if we could get there or not. So we're going to continue to lean into our cultural offerings, and that's where our humanity is.
And what do you enjoy most about, even just over your time working in the community, and for OLA, what do you find the most rewarding thing for you that you continue to do this?
I think because I've been here a little bit, I certainly don't call myself a local. Won't make that mistake. But I think having time that I've gotten to spend with different families, with little ones, like a 6-year-old who I knew back in 2016, who shared some things that were so sad about how much fear they had, seeing that child now, seeing that child thrive and kind of work through very difficult times, and knowing that we were part of the life of that family at one point, means a whole lot. I think working with youth in general is absolutely my solace, my go-to. I love the work that Youth Connect is doing. Education is a big part of our work as well. So it's advocacy, education, and the arts. And education for us is public education, getting word out about things that are important, but also education itself. So we run a scholarship program. We have given to date 25 scholarships out, and they are multi-year scholarships. Just this year, we gave out 2 scholarships to Greenport students and 4 to East Hampton students. The year prior, we gave out all 6 scholarships out to Riverhead students. And we do this across the entire East End. And these are multi-year and up to $18,000 per child.
Wow.
For a 4-year school, 4-year commitment. And it's a very detailed program. We're working with those students and those families throughout the entire process. We're working with them to see where their GPAs are, and why they might be dipping a little bit. And we work on financial budgeting. Is it GPA? Did I say it right?
They're
Grade point average. Yeah.
GPA.
Okay. I was like, did I say the wrong thing? So we stick with them during the entire process. And we've got students right now going to NYU for nursing. We've got students going to Suffolk for architecture. And we also support vocational training. So if someone wanted to go in and become an electrician or a plumber, we would have money for that as well. And so we're super proud of that. And that brings me so much happiness when everything else is going on around us, but we've got youth with some big dreams, and they're going to get there. They're going to make those things happen. And a lot of youth that we're working with are from multi-generational homes, love the East End of Long Island. We're doing a lot with the environment as well right now. So some of our youth programming is including partnerships with Peconic Baykeeper, Acabonic Protection, I forget what it's called, but Acabonic, the Peconic Land Trust. We're part of the work that we do is also to kind of embrace the surroundings that we have here. How do we build people who want to be entrusted with this land, entrusted to take care of this land? How do we build that? You build access. You make sure that families have access to trail systems, that they can also understand what kind of flora and fauna and birds and all that, are around there. How can they engage with it? As they're engaging with this beautiful space around them, they care about it. They want to protect it. Water quality, the bays, nitrogen levels. I mean, they're not separate from each other. And when we have 50% Latino student body, you better believe it's important to make sure that those families are as engaged and learning as much about this environment around us. So I see all the beauty, all the potential, and which is why when some of the other things are happening, why they hurt so bad, is because I just cannot believe that everyone else can't see the beauty that we see.
Yes. And now just looking ahead, there's some challenges and influx going on right now and fear. But moving forward for OLA, what's your vision for the broader community in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, what we'd like to see happen is continued collaboration with the organizations, the new organizations that will be formed, the existing organizations. We'd like to see that grow stronger. We'd like there to be a sort of a deeper connection and collaboration with the institutions across the East End. Not because we want to be there saying, hey, you should do it like this, you should do it like that, but because the point of dialogue, we can't be afraid of dialogue. We can't be afraid to learn about the things that we don't know. And we don't know a lot of things. OLA doesn't know a lot of things. But if we're not in a comfortable enough space to be able to say, hey, I don't understand how that policy works. I don't understand how this institution handles X. Can you share that with me? We have to be able to do that. And I feel like we need to make that more of a practice and less of once in a blue moon, we had a meeting. But what is an ongoing practice of making sure that the institutions that exist out here are engaging with those small, nonprofit, faith-based, family-based, whatever it might be ready and open to receive that information, to be having that dialogue. It's only going to make our community stronger and safer and healthier. So we want to be a part of that sort of shift of what does that take? What does that look like? So it feels safe. It doesn't feel like someone's pointing a finger at you and always telling you you're doing the wrong thing. But what does it feel like when we're actually working together to meet the needs of our shared community? What is the benefit? How do we feel that benefit? And when our youth are telling us that there's a benefit there, when our seniors are telling us that there's a benefit there, when the numbers in terms of health outcomes are telling us that there's a benefit there, how are we going to work together and do that? So OLA would like to see more of that happen. We would like to be a helpful driving force in all of that. And we would also like to see some of what we do when it's working and when it doesn't work, I'll say that, kind of exist as, something to be looked at, to be studied, to kind of be looked at. Like, hey, we that was an interesting approach. Let's learn from what didn't work. And how do we share that out? How can we be transparent about what works and doesn't work, at least from OLA's perspective? And ultimately, we'd like to see that is a 5-year, 10-year. That's a generational thing. We're looking at a generational need, 20, 30 years, whatever it's going to be, for us to kind of commit a lot of our energies, regardless of where we might come from politically, to serving the needs of our actual shared communities, people that are living right here, not people that are talking in the air, talking on Facebook, talking somewhere in some other state or Washington, but we're living right here. And how are we going to meet the needs of our shared community right here and stop being separated from each other?
And then I think I had just one other question, more so personally for you. What have you enjoyed about living and working on the East End of Long Island?
I guess the chance that I have almost every day to get to maybe meet someone from a different background, a different area of study, of work, a different person, a different perspective. So that's exciting for me. And because it's part of what I get to do. And and then also just being able to be in these beautiful areas and to walk on the bay, to float in the bay, to to take the trail systems. I'd like to do some mountain biking, and so to be riding around in 114 on a mountain bike and experience that, and just to experience the community members that are here and still from all different backgrounds. You know, people that are working in theater, in music, in the arts, in working in the landscaping industry and construction and house cleaning. And I feel like I get to step into these different worlds, and it is a really kind of charmed position to be in.
And I usually just ask at the end if there is anything else you'd like to say or discuss that we haven't touched on or talked about.
I think we got to talk about a lot. I mean, about the advocacy, education, and the arts. I think we were able to show kind of how OLA holds those areas up and why those areas are so important to us. And just that I am incredibly grateful to do the work that I do. It's a dream job for me. And I'm incredibly proud of the team that I get to work with and the communities I get to engage with and partnerships that I get to have. So I think the gratitude piece is something that I want to make sure I put out there because I am extremely grateful.
Yes. But no, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast today and share your story as well as all the work you've done for OLA. It's really important for our community out here. So thank you so much for coming on.
Very welcome, Chris. Thank you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 142 with Minerva Perez. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.